and another sucker. Get that. I can't help but start singing along every time I hear that. How y'all doing? How you doing, Kali?
I'm holding up.
Holding
I'm
up. I know
holding up.
that's right. I'm holding up too. My name is Tonda Cesare Shimaringa, and this is Root Work on Black Liberation Media. And this is the final installment of the Build and Fight formula brought to you in concert with Cooperation Jackson, their YouTube channel, Jackson Rising. This has been a monthly series hosted by Kali Akuno, co-founder, co-director of Cooperation Jackson in Jackson, Mississippi. We've been doing this since February of this year, and today is the final installment of this culmination of educational pieces designed to help transform society called the Build and Fight formula. We've been going through all the different pieces of that formula, which at some point in 2026 is going to be a book. Is that correct, Kali?
It will be written in 2026, in
Okay.
large part thanks to us going through this over the year.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm gonna press Pluto to try to get it out in 2026, but we'll see how that goes.
All right. I know that's right. It's been rough. It's been a rough 2025. It's been a rough, like, shit, it's been a rough month and a half for me. I didn't even, you see how my chair doing, right? You, no, right here. You see all of this, right? It's rough, y'all. It's rough, but we hanging in here until the end. We gonna make it into 2026 prayerfully. We gonna get there. We gonna get there. I see we got a couple of folks in the chat. Catch up with y'all in a second, but hopefully, I mean, again, this has been a monthly series. It's been a very educational, informative, enlightening, and critical series. I don't want to take too much time going over recapping what we've done, but there needs to be a summation, probably not right now today. Maybe we can do that in January. But today's piece, this last piece, is on dual power, also known as free the land. So we don't want to take too much time away from that particular topic, but I am going to put it out there. There needs to be a summation somewhere, some way, some shape, somehow of these past 11 months, or how many months it's been. I don't even know. That's how
11 months. You
it is.
got it.
It's been
11 months.
11 months. Okay. So greetings, everybody. Greetings, everyone. How y'all doing? How y'all bees? Oh, thank you. All right. So I'm gonna let you take it away. I'm the co-pilot. I'm just sitting over here in the corner with my raggedy chair. Kali, I'm gonna let you
Well,
handle
just to jump in, I think first want to thank you for hosting, and guiding and doing the facilitation and the background work. I don't
it.
think folks are always aware of what how much work the folks put in. So we always got to appreciate that and uplift it. So I want to thank you and to everyone who has tuned in over the last 11 months. Whether you've joined us live, whether you've watched the videos afterwards, whether you listened to it on Hard Knock Radio, or watched it again as a kind of a rebroadcast on either Democracy at Work or Black Liberation Media. I want to give you thanks for all of your comments, your feedback. Part of what you're talking about a summation, part of what I really want to do, Tandy, and me and you will talk about this and bring it back. But one form or another, there were a lot of questions, that got posed during the shows and afterwards that we didn't really get a chance to get into. And we want to go back and just answer a lot of those and refine a lot of those, because a lot of you all's questions would lead into how we did the next one. And sometimes we didn't make that always explicit. But if folks notice and been following us along, almost each one became much more kind of current to the events of the day. And part of that was by design, really kind of anticipating how the Trump regime was going to move, and us trying to always, trying to design a program for many years back that will be able to kind of withstand the neo-Confederate onslaught, which they've telegraphed, wrote about. To anybody who's paid attention, Project 2025 was perhaps the most the clear summation, as you were talking about, Tom, probably the clearest summation of a lot of their thought, really articulated as policy, but also strategy that they put out. But I want folks to remember that was the accumulation of well over about 30 years of a close collaboration between the right-wing forces that it put that together, and they have been telegraphing that all along. So we really tried to pull something together that would counter that. I still think that if we can put all these components together in our respective communities, it will give us a fighting chance. And if and when we are able to kind of federate, the various projects that emerge and develop, it could give us an opportunity to articulate and bring forth something new. But there's a lot of work that has to be done in between there. So moving on into this, and today I want to try to leave a lot of time for questions and answers, right? So if you look at how we've done this series, and I'm doing a little bit of review ahead of time, Tandy. So if you look at how we've done this series, we kind of broke it into two halves, right? And so the first half is what we call, the practices of position. And that is getting things in place to contest for power. And that ran the gamut of mutual aid, food sovereignty, worker self-organization, community production, creating digital commons, self-defense, and then people's power, people's assemblies and planning councils. That's the core meat and the core set of practices that, unlike trying to prescribe and make things up, these are things that in various forms, movements are doing all throughout the U.S. empire already, right? And that people are doing by the tunes that millions are already doing. And one of the core arguments that we've always presented is we have to figure out how, over geographic distance, over sometimes language barriers, over ideological differences, how do we coordinate to be effective? How do we coordinate to build power? How do we coordinate to wield power? How do we coordinate to transform society? Because we are not in the minority. That's one of the critical things I want folks to understand. There's far more of us who are practicing this and participating in various forms of building and various forms of fighting that outnumber the forces of the right. But they are better organized. It's not a lot of ourselves. They're better organized and they're far better financed than we are. So we have to take that and try to do some judo and flip it.
Better organization trumps numbers. So
time and time again, right?
We got to get organized.
Right, time and time again. So the other half of those practices is we've covered two. And that was the general strike, and that was democratizing the economy, right? Those are the practices of maneuver. Now, that's after we've built enough force that we can actually make a contest for power, right? And so these are more prefigurative and more imaginal, than anything. They cannot really be moved until a certain mass of power emerges, a certain level of coordination, organization emerges. And why do we include them? Why, the initial piece was to get people to think beyond just having a good people's assembly, right? And a few good co-ops and, being able to feed a few people here and there in the community. It's to get people to think big and to understand what it would really take to move into creating a new society. And it is not going to be without conflict, right? We cannot be conflict avoided. Our enemies are sure enough not conflict avoided. They are the masters of war, masters of genocide, and we have to be prepared at the highest level, to be able to contend with them. And so this piece around dual power to get into it,
Mhm.
that is saying, trying to put out, as we describe it, once, to kind of to break it down. So the general strike, that's just strike, making sure that we disrupt the economy and the powers that be to the greatest extent possible. Democratize the economy, that means occupy as much of the economy, cooperating businesses, cooperating institutions, basically attaining and utilizing all the means of production to our extent in a broad democratic manner. But that is not going to go untested. It's not going to go unchallenged if we get to that point. And they will begin to throw everything that they have at us. And they have a remarkable arsenal of destruction. We need to be very clear about that. And if you have any doubts about it, just look at Gaza, look at the Sudan. There's countless other places we can look at right now on the planet.
Well,
and its allies are destroying people in wholesale genocide.
but you know what? I can see somebody saying right now, well, you talking about Sudan, you talking about Gaza. That's way over there. What they got to do with LA, Jackson, Atlanta, Chicago? When you say these people are running amok, they're not going to really run amok on us here, are they?
They are already.
I mean, yeah, I know that. I'm just saying, right? They National Guard.
Yeah, no, they will. I mean,
Chicago,
look,
Portland or Seattle, National Guard in the streets.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked it because, there's a lot of illusions that folks in the United States have been conditioned to have. And how this society is constructed, how its education moves, how the media moves, all these things are cast way over there somewhere with some people who, you can't even pronounce their names. So what relevance do they have to my life? They don't tell you about all the weapons that are built right in your backyard in LA, in Seattle, that are the bombs, the guns, the tanks, the planes. That's being built primarily in the United States and then shipped overseas, right, to kill, maim people. And so any broad sense of international consciousness means that we, those of us who work here, who live here, we are the primary place to intervene. But the consciousness has to be there and the connection has to be there. Right. And that's the critical piece that I'm always trying to bring. That is not something that's over there, because how this empire works, it's everywhere. Right. It's not by accident that the United States government has over 270 bases all throughout the world. That's just the ones we know about. They got other bases that they don't tell nobody about. Right. And you only find out when somebody die or some accident happened, or they got something in this little place in the Philippines or someplace up in Tajikistan, places most people ain't ever even heard of, and then find out, oh, there's some base there that was not on the listing of what they put out. So, this empire, and it is an empire. That's one of the things we need to get folks to be.
That's what empire means. Yeah.
This is an empire. They ain't over there fighting for nobody's freedom. They fighting to seize people's resources and control their labor, their land and labor. That's what this whole thing is about, right? And they take all this in either for free or very discounted prices, the prices that they fundamentally control, and they use that to buy off as much of the working class in this country as possible. And even that is very much from the beginning, segmented based upon race and gender as to who gets what rewards for the most part. And if you really look at it, a large part of Trump's program is, I'm just not giving no benefits to y'all Negroes no more, right? All of the piracy is going to go directly to the people who look like me, right? Who's going to support me in doing what I want to do, and the other little rich courtier people I have around me and whose interests I primarily serve, making sure that they are rich. This is the folks that we're going to have to contend with. So I'm glad you asked that question, because we got to be clear on, like, what are our enemies prepared to do? But then it begins to sharpen up, well, what are we prepared to do?
Yeah.
Right? what are we prepared to do? And I want to leave people thinking about that. And that's not an individual question. Like that has to wind up being a social question, a political question that we pose. Because we got to get clear, like ICE is still in the streets in Los Angeles, as they are most parts of the country now. The military is still in the streets of Los Angeles, right? They haven't gone nowhere. I saw something how LA defeated the Trump or something like that. I was like, I don't know who you lying to. They still there. They ain't going nowhere. And we have to get clear, because part of the danger of going into 2026, and I see it at least from my vantage point. If somebody wants to argue, with me, I'm willing to definitely take that. But part of the danger that has already occurred is that there's a way in which this has become normal already, right? That is the danger. And the more it becomes normal, the more it becomes institutionalized. You see, month in and month out, they are just constantly, stepping the line further and moving the line further and further and further, right, to total impunity. So much so that Trump has ruled out that he won't commit extrajudicial killings upon his political opponents in the United States. They are saying that openly, as they are making, kill lists. I want folks to be clear about that. That little executive order and designating folks as domestic terrorists, and Pam Bondi and the FBI saying that we're going to look at all the folks who are anti-capitalist, anti-Christian, who support queer folks, who intervene in protecting the civil and human rights of folks who they deem to not have papers in this country, that they are making a list and are going to go after people. Now you marry that with them making even more clear that the division of civil rights is being rearmed and reorganized to go after all the folks who have discriminated against white people for the last 50 years. Right? So they are executing their revolution.
Yeah.
Are we prepared to counter and to pull something together new? And I'm gonna stress the new, because there make no bones about it, we have to unite against all those who want to fight against fascism. I fully agree with that. But I'm under no illusion that there is not going to be some contest with some of the folks, particularly in the Democratic Party, who just want to return back to the days of Biden.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And just go back to the neoliberal order, which is what produced the consequences we are now suffering with right now. So there's a fight that we're going to have to engage. Like, no, we can't just return back to the way things were for the last 40 or 50 years. That's not sufficient. It's not going to solve the crisis. It's not going to solve the issues at hand, the massive unemployment, the declining standard of living. It's not going to solve that. So we have to pose something new. Now, in coming back to one point, I want folks to be clear that in the use of dual powers I'm using here, it is to describe, within the Building Fight formula, it is described this point of actual contest, right? There are others, many of whom I'm alive with, share some kinship with, who use that as a frame to talk about how you build power over a long period of time by building independent institutions that challenge for sovereignty and authority over society in a broad democratic manner. Both of them are totally legitimate. They're not in contrast or competition with each other, but just want to be clarified that in this sense, I'm meaning it more or less aligned to the more famous kind of uses of that term, probably the most famous being, the Russian Revolution and what happened in the context that after the Tsar was deposed, was defeated, the provisional government took over, which was, kind of aimed to be a liberal, bourgeois, democratic, institution, and that of the workers, organized through basically people's assemblies and workers' councils that were called Soviets. That's where the Soviet and the Soviet Union came from. That kind of went through a contest of power for several months, until which time the Soviets emerged as the victor and then created a new society with all of its, tremendous breakthroughs and faults, rights and failures. So it's something for us to look at. But we want to try to strive for that direct confrontation of power and be critically aware of what it will take when we get there to come out on the other side victorious. That is the aim of putting it there and saying that we have to, there's a lot of building and there's a great deal of organization that is going to have to happen in a new way, right? Because the way this formula has been articulated, it's not that it couldn't work or would benefit from having a number of different cadre organizations pushing and developing a number of particular pieces. It's not absent of that, right? Or it wouldn't be necessarily immune to folks wanting to make a particular contribution in that aim. But we learning the lessons from the 20th century and in both the successes and failures of many revolutions, we understand that it has to be a broad people's engagement. It has to be a broad way of engaging, the masses of people and transforming their consciousness and transforming their practices in the process of building these types of institutions to create a new society, and not just be dependent upon the party or a coalition, because we know very well now that is not sufficient to accomplish the task at hand. Now, the last part, just to be clear, when we say free the land, and I want folks to understand, that term means something very clear and specific to me as someone who is a partisan of the New African Independence Movement. So that's what it's drawn from. There's no hiding, no disguising it. But in this sense, we're including that particular derivation to be inclusive of the liberation of New African people, of indigenous people, of Chicano Latinos, Puerto Ricans, Hawaiians, all those who are direct colonized subjects of this empire on the land that it occupies. But we also, in a broader sense, right, and that is creating a new society that is in more right relationship with the land and with the earth and its systems, so that humanity can sustain itself and survive for generations to come. And I say that because, all the information that's coming in, it's very clear that, many of the projections that say most of the climactic tipping points was going to be reached in 2050, we done blown past most of them already.
Yeah.
They're here, and they are only going to get worse. And it's going to take a profound transformation and a profound reorganization of society to reverse that. Otherwise, regardless of what we do, we'll be, those coming after us will be living on diminishing returns. And there's a very real threat of extinction of the species on account of folks not being willing to give up.
Which species would that be, sir?
The human species. At the end of the day, it's my view, the planet's going to be all right, right? Mother Earth is going to be fine at the end of the day, and when you put it all in perspective, we only been here, it's what, 4.5 billion years of this planet, the third rock from the sun being around. If you tally all up, I think we've been here something like 5 minutes, right, in the broad geological scale. So we a blip that, give it a couple of million years, the carbon cycle will return. If we're not around, all that stuff will return and something new will emerge. So I rest well at night, just to be honest with y'all, understanding that the earth is going to be around, and that's the biggest thing. This is a very precious planet, the only one that we know. I'm going to borrow from Carl Sagan like that can sustain creatures like us. But if we don't treat it right, in a broad sense, we may not be deserving of it. So I want to be deserving of it in everything that is bestowed. So that requires me to be a revolutionary as I see it, right? Or at least strive to be that, and try to put myself in right relationship. That means a new relationship to energy. That means a new relationship to consumption, right? A new relation on how we produce, the goods and services, weakening, eliminating to the greatest extent possible our dependency on hydrocarbons, producing electricity or energy in much more efficient ways, returning back to the primary source, which is the sun, to do all that. And so it's going to require a lot of innovation. There's some of the tools that are in our possession now, but through a revolutionary process, we would have to innovate a lot more to be able to get us to a point where we're not being as wasteful and destructive of our environment. So we're talking about a massive reorganization. And that is what I mean in particular, making a contribution about freeing the land, which requires a deeper freeing of the people and us freeing ourselves of the systems that have taught us and put us in the position to be abused in the way that it is. So that part is, the way it's articulated, meant to be articulated there in this formula that I'm opening it up is, imagine winning that contest, right? So it's not just saying that one is just announcing dual power, is that there will be a contest and we have to win. Let me make that clear. There will be a contest and we have to win. But when we win, we then have to transform the society in a profoundly different way to not kind of repeat the cycle of violence and destruction that we've seen with so many of the revolutions and projects that have existed in the course of history as we understand it.
Right.
And that's a tall order. And I want folks to be clear that we can't just assume that just winning something in the United States would be sufficient, right? Ultimately, we have to put something on a global scale because capital and empire will reform in other places, regroup and strike back. That is the nature of the global system that we live in. So this requires us to be internationalists, right? And that is going to be a tall learning also within itself because of the nature of the conflicts and contradiction that capitalism poses. We all have little aspects of xenophobia in us. Some of it justified to a degree of how we've been treated by various groups, but we're going to have to figure out how to overcome that. I don't have all the answers. I don't think any of us do. That's why it's going to have to be a collective process, but that has to be guided by principles and clear vision to get us there.
Okay. I know that's right. And if you've just joined us, what time we got here? I see you, Joshua Kings. We 30 minutes in. This is the final installment of the Build and Fight formula brought to you by Cooperation Jackson Rising. We've got Kali Okuno, co-founder, co-director of Cooperation Jackson, based in Jackson, Mississippi. We've been doing this series for the past 11 months. 11 parts to it, the Build and Fight formula. Today we are talking about dual power, i.e. freeing the land from the psychopaths and the sociopaths and the megalomaniacs that currently have the planet in its grip. And that's worldwide, not just, like I said, the planet, not just Washington, D.C.
That is worldwide. I mean, there could be, from some of the latest reports I've received today, just a few minutes before this show, both from your mainstream capitalist media, but also from folks in Latin America, but in Venezuela itself. It looks like a direct attack, not just on the boats, that are in the Caribbean and in the Pacific, but a direct attack on Venezuela could be imminent any day now, right?
On Venezuelan soil, yeah.
Yep. It looks like Marco Rubio is going to get the war that he wants, and that with the recent kind of string of victories that Trump has and his allies have been able to win in Latin America, and people should not discount that. What happened in Chile has an impact on you, right? The son of a Nazi winning an election to become the chief executive of Chile is going to have an impact upon all of us who are listening or viewing this. Then there was their recent victory in Honduras from 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Another right wing, fascist won there. You already have, his ally who's running that death camp in El Salvador in power. You have the little wannabe Trump running Argentina. And so, if they're able to really take out the three kind of remaining leftist governments in Latin America, what many are calling, myself included, the Donroe Doctrine, will have a profound impact on how the great game, the great contest that all of the past, 5 administrations have been gearing up for, and that's an eventual and perhaps an inevitable war with China. And if they can totally consolidate, the Western Hemisphere under their kind of sphere of influence and cut China off from, materials and markets and resources, and most important, political allies, it would give them a tremendous kind of leg up and kind of escalate and advance that. So, I want people to understand Venezuela as part of a grand strategy that the imperialists are playing, to eliminate any notion of sovereignty and self-determination for peoples in Latin America. So they plan and they plan to win. And on that, we need to be clear. Fascism is capitalist rule orchestrated to resolve the deep crisis in the system, right? It's like the last resort where they openly just resort to force to make, the balance sheets balance again and bring back profitability. We are in that stage. So no one should have any illusions that even though he was striving to get a peace prize, just be glad that Obama got one. He's aiming toward war, and he's going to utilize war as the primary.
Your audio is going in and out, colleague. Where's your microphone?
It's got an echo.
Okay.
I don't know what that's because I didn't change anything. Maybe them people.
Them again. Okay. Them again. All right.
Putting us on an island.
Say again.
I said they more likely listening in and putting us on not even constructive.
Yeah, folks in the chat are saying that they can. It's not just me. They're hearing the audio also. So that means we gotta speed it up before they put us on mute altogether.
Is that better? Change?
No. Do what you can. Do the best that you can.
Yeah, I apologize, everybody,
I said the echo's making it very hard to understand.
Yeah.
Are you where are you? That doesn't look like you're. Try muting when Kali talks. All right. I'm gonna shut up then, Kali, for a minute.
I don't know if it's you. Let's see. Let's try that. I guess maybe it did, Tandy, which is also different because I know you didn't change anything or shift anything. But yeah, to speed some of this up and to get to some of the questions, I saw one that I wanted to take, and Tandy, you may be able to pull something up. But I saw one that was about alternative currencies. I think alternative currencies are definitely tools in the toolkit in the solidarity economy, and all of the practices that we describe, particularly in the framework of the side of the the practices of position. All of those fall within different realms or aspects of what we would call the kind of the solidarity economy. And kind of creating local currencies can have a tremendous impact. If nothing else, I think the exercise of doing it and getting people to kind of ascribe their own way of exchanging value, right? Which is what currencies are, a means of doing. The organizing of that, yeah, I think is the most critical point to build a collective orientation on how goods and services could be produced, how people's labor, time, energy, intellect are valued, right? That and they can be valued in ways that more approximate the true value of all labor having dignity, right? As opposed to this kind of hierarchical way in which capitalism kind of meets things out. So it is definitely worth doing, but do it with the recognition that it poses some challenges to those who do it. The U.S. basically in its history, I want folks to understand currency in the United States has a very uh, complicated history. The states used to print their own money. I don't know if folks are aware of that. It took some time for the standard kind of greenback to emerge. I think it in the form that we currently have it, that didn't fully come to being, I think, until the 1880s or the 1890s, right? And it used to be backed by gold, and then that was kind of taken off of that standard by Richard Nixon when he let the U.S. dollar float. And that system is the system we have now, where the U.S. currency floats, right? And its value is determined primarily by kind of an international bond market, wherein people buy treasuries and bonds into the United States government as a guarantor of value on account of its position in the global economy and the U.S. military. And I want folks to, if you haven't been paying attention, the largest buyer and the largest holder of U.S. debt, i.e. Japan, they have been dumping U.S. debt at a tremendous pace all year long, but particularly the last 2 weeks, they've just been shedding it. Their currency is in a current steep decline, but it's definitely going to have some major impact on the U.S. economy as they're releasing that debt. Is going to change the value of the dollar, and I would argue really hasten, the decentering of the United States as the center of the world economy, as the United States, is very quickening the pace, despite everything we talked about earlier in terms of the kind of success of the right. Their success does not necessarily mirror how the economic world, of capitalism, the global capitalist system functions. That also has its own logic, a lot of which is kind of mediated by the United States, but not ultimately determined by the United States. And so the economic decline of the United States, Trump has just accelerated that, I would argue, in a number of fundamental ways with his tariffs and other kind of measures that he's done. China is another major holder of U.S. debt. They are also shedding it, and more countries are looking at the EU, the renminbi, etc., as ways of how they're meeting with each other, and so that we need to get prepared for what that will mean. That for us, we need to understand that a lot of the goods and services that we have known to be cheap for most of our lives, right? At least cheap relative to a global standard. We may start having to live by the global standard or more approximate to the global standard. And what do I mean by that? Anybody who's been to Europe and sees how much gas costs in Europe compared to the United States, you then realize how much gas is subsidized and has been subsidized pretty much your entire life. But that period is coming to an end. And the cost of living on this side is going to skyrocket, which people are already experiencing. We all already experiencing in one way or another. Us creating local currencies and local means of exchange is a particular way that we can offset some of that. But we need to be clear that the local will not deal with the global dimensions of the economy that we are in, right? It will be a relief, but it's not in and of itself the solution. We're going to have to build something broader, bigger, stronger for that to be an actual solution. So just keep that in mind as you're looking to development, that it's a welcome benefit, but it has limitations.
I was going to ask, trying to just go back over, not necessarily for the people who tuned in late, but when we talk about dual power, how do we get there? If you could,
Well,
if you could go back to that for us, please.
Yeah, I mean, we get there in short by being organized, right? There is no substitute for that. And what we have tried to put forward, most people think, and how I think we've been oriented to think, is that particularly on the left in the United States and a large part of the world, that we build the party or a party, right? And it has this, through training and ideological development, that it operates on one accord to act politically, largely through protests, right, or through strike actions, and that is the fundamental way that in which we change, the world. That is the way I think most of us are being oriented towards.
Well,
what the left should do.
When you say party, there's a Democratic Party, Republican Party, there's elections. So, but
no,
other parties, well, that's how. What are parties?
No, we're not talking about the way in which that term has been perverted in the United States, right? What folks should know of, perhaps the clearest example that you might have, and we have many, and think of the Black Panther Party, think of like the Communist Party. These are groups that are organized to accomplish a certain set of revolutionary goals and objectives. They are often cadre, that is, people who have dedicated their lives to accomplishing certain goals and have gone through training, willing to operate, along the discipline of the organization as determined by the organization, to execute its program and to execute its vision, and to move in concerted fashion, often in the militaristic type fashion, to accomplish various goals. That is the way in which most of us, even the Republican Party is in its present iteration, is somewhat approximating that. That's at least what Steve Bannon has in his mind about his particular wing of the Republican Party, about how they want to kind of move and orchestrate. And he doesn't hesitate to tell us time and time again, anybody who listens to him, how much he's borrowed from Mao and Lenin and all this other kind of stuff himself. He reads left literature and has copied that in a parody. And that's not, I want folks to be clear, that's not unique per se, right? And so, why do I say that? Go look at Mussolini. Mussolini was once a member of the Socialist International, right? The party that he come from, and his particular breed of fascism as a kind of a third way is that he took a lot of the organizing methods that he had learned on the left in leftist organizations, and then put them in the service of capital and political politics on the right. So there's a long history of this. This is not something that Steve Bannon just made up. So, but what I'm arguing for is that there's been a disconnect. I think particularly some of us who were either born in the 60s or immediately thereafter, and our notion of how to organize comes primarily through a protest lens rather than a productive lens. And so if you look at some of kind of the old left from like before the 60s, most of their cadre were tuned into joining labor unions as a primary means of doing their organizing work, and organizing at where they worked primarily to try to build power there, to shape the relations of production at the point of production, to be able to re-articulate how goods were produced, under what terms and conditions, and ultimately that some of the actual the thinking was for those who kind of embedded themselves in those unions, to move them into vehicles that would then execute the democratic control over that, so they can repivot production and do it in a more democratic way. What I've tried to do in casting this is really combine some of those two or bring it back. And that's not necessarily anything new, but I think it's for a younger generation that didn't grow up with a great deal of trade union organizing, or their parents were part of trade unions. And it's not that's not to cast blame on the younger generation, because you are a product of what you experience. And the trade unions, largely in the United States, their last great heyday, if you would, was in the 1970s, when the last great wave of strikes, the last great wave of kind of getting people to join unions, basically was in the 1970s. And when Ronald Reagan came in, and his particular brand of right-wing politics came in, he was very clear about, I'm going to smash and destroy these unions. And as soon as he had an opportunity and open, he did. And the first one he did was he broke the pilots and the the aircraft controllers union. He broke them.
And that
was just kind of set a domino of decline that the trade union movement, particularly, is still to this day trying to work itself out of. There's been little fits and spurts of activity, including one now with like Amazon workers and them organizing, the Starbucks workers organizing. So the effort still goes on. But we need to be clear, at least in the United States, trade unions now represent about 10% of workers in the United States, which means 90% of the people who are in, officially sanctioned employment, 90% of them are not in any organized body whatsoever. So it constitutes a majority. And we have to think about, short of having those types of institutions to organize, how do we reach the masses number of people and get them to be involved on a more communal level to do the organizing work that is not dependent by or on many of the kind of ritualized ways in which trade union kind of got instituted in this country. Why do I say that? Because there's one way in which the National Labor Relations Act, which emerged and, came out of the struggles of the 1930s and all the protests that the Congress of Industrial Organizations, the CIO and the AFL, that they, and other independent trade unions and activists were able to force upon, United States and the economy at that time to make certain concessions. But the way that they made those concessions has always been a problem. Because what they did was take out the politics in the act. They made it so the acts cannot be in solidarity, right? You could not execute a general strike, and if you did, it would be deemed to be illegal, and the state would then have the direct ability to intervene to either arrest people or force them back to work, which they've used time and time again. So they depoliticized it, and we've been working, along the limitations of that basically since that act was enacted, was 1935. And so because of the weaknesses that exist within the movement, and because capital knows no bounds and no limits, my argument is we don't need to know no bounds and limits, right? And if 90% of people who are working in this country are not organized, that don't mean that they have to be organized within the old institutions. New types of institutions can be born that aren't bound by the limitations of the National Labor Relations Act. We need to think about that. And organizing more on a communal level is one particular way of doing that. There are others, right? I want folks to look up, if you're not familiar with the IWW, the International Workers of the World, and their particular orientation on how to organize workers, or organize working class folks. Look it up, look up their history, because it's a different model than the one that we have today, and one I think that more approximate gaining success in the current world economy.
I was thinking that one of the, if not the greatest major hurdle, is not as quote unquote tangible. You can't really get your hands on it. It reminds me of Gramsci and hegemony. It's the beliefs in the ultimate goodness and rightness of this American project. Mm-hmm. That if we could just do a couple of tweaks, we will be as great as we've said or imagined ourselves to be. I'm like, no, no. It's that American exceptionalism Kool-Aid is what I
Exceptionalism.
call it.
Yep. It's a deadly poison, but it is widely drunk. Even amongst a good number of Black and brown folks, it is widely drunk. We cannot lie to ourselves. So, and we are swimming against the current. Trying to uplift this and try to change it. And that's going to be that American exceptionalism. It rears its heads in a lot of different ways, and it's definitely something that we are going to have to confront. And you see it, like in some of the No Kings motion. And I encourage everybody, to get out and be involved in the protest movement, in the resistance movement, and even with the limitations that they are trying to impose by not bringing up controversial issues, like they don't want folks to talk about genocide in Palestine in any fundamental way. But it's our job to bring it up, right? And to have signs and be involved in conversations with folks who are out there, to see who shares views with us, and to try to figure out ways to engage with folks to kind of change their views, or to expose them to more of the facts on the ground, how things got that way, what aims and interests does it serve, to have this rogue European colony way over in Southwest Asia to serve as a pit bull, and how the British and the United States paired up, to kind of create that. These are things that we have to bring to the party, right? And to do to kind of change that particular notion, to counter, all the different degrees and variants of American exceptionalism, which American exceptionalism, let's be clear, is a particular variant of a settler colonial ideology, right? And understanding that this is a settler colonial project, the preeminent settler colonial project in the world today. It's not the only one, right? Israel's another one, right? A little spin-off 51st state, if you want to call it that. That's fundamentally how it operates, but Australia, or the greatest way to kind of look at it, whenever the United States talks about the international community, right? And they mean like Australia, New Zealand, themselves, Canada, and like Western Europe. That's what they really deem to be the international community. And it's like a cabal of settler colonial white states and regimes that exist, that only have the kind of legitimate voice, and they set up most of the world institutions, like the Bretton Woods institutions, which is the IMF, the World Bank, and the WTO, the World Trade Organization, and then also the United Nations. Were very much set up by the United States to kind of execute this world vision and to put themselves in the preeminent place. And if you don't believe me, just listen to them, right? I want you guys to go back and J.D. Vance, I think, gave one of the clearest speeches about U.S. imperialism to me ever uttered, when he gave a speech in February. I'll try to find it and put it out on one of the links. And he makes a claim, like globalization, right? And us creating all these Bretton Woods institutions was he says, he makes it very clear, it was supposed to set us up, meaning the United States, to basically rule for as long as possible. It was going to expand trade and all this other kind of stuff, but make sure that everybody was in a subservient position to the United States economy and its needs. He don't make no bones about it, and saying it messed up because China came in and distorted the rules, according to them, right? Distorted the rules and didn't play by the rules that were established by them. So they exercise, their own sovereignty and self-determination to kind of, position themselves. But they make it very clear, and that's one thing I hope, despite all the ominous threats, that the Trump regime poses, they do pose a lot of clarity, right? And we need to respect that. And what I mean by respect that is, like, believe them when they tell you, I'm trying to kill you. And tell people, like, hey, they said it. If you don't believe me, this is straight out their mouth. Now, what can me and you do to defend each other, defend our community against this threat? They help to cast away illusions, is my point. But I think we're not doing a good enough job to organize on the basis of clarity that they are providing. And that goes back to this challenge around American exceptionalism. Folks just like, well, he's rude, he's crass, but the rude and crassness just to a degree exposes in more plain English what Biden was doing, what Obama was doing, and how he's a continuation of many of the extension things that they've been doing. Like we were just talking a minute ago about Venezuela. That's not just a Republican campaign, right? The Democrats, have been deeply involved and implicated in that. This kind of pending war that they've been gearing up with China. That's not just a Republican thing, right? Obama and them created that whole pivot towards Asia framework and doctrine, which basically stated that is going to be the major contest, and where they thought the U.S. empire should focus its energy on furthering to contain China, and if not, take it out and make it subservient to the United States, so that it wouldn't be a challenger or rival or competitor, or wouldn't assume hegemony over the international system, in the years to come. So, we need to they present a level of clarity. We need to organize along the clarity, and we still got a lot of work on that end to do.
I think a lot of it, going back to, brown skin hegemony, this Kool-Aid, this delusion that folks have. I can see it. It's like, okay, this is just too wild. This is too over the top. He can't be serious. This can't be happening. I think that has to do with a lot of what some people are part of the ways that people are viewing this. It's like it's incredulous, so they're like deers in headlights. Like, this is not happening, and yet it's happening in front of everyone's eyes.
But I think we need to be also clear that most of the folks who kind of hold that view fall within kind of the American liberal side of the equation.
But that's what I'm saying. They're the ones in the way.
I don't disagree with you on that at all.
They're in the way, man. They're in the way.
Well, we have to convert as many of them as we can. Let's not lie to ourselves about that, because we need numbers, right? Numbers in themselves, as we've been saying, me and you both been saying, does not beat organization, right? But best believe numbers will count in the contest for power, right? Because we are not going to be able to outspend them. We are not going to be able to when push come to shove on the top, we're not going to have more guns in them, or they have a serious, monopoly on violence. And how do you contract that? You got to put masses of people in direct opposition in a number of different ways. That's not just through protests, but also boycotts, through strikes, withholding of your labor. There are a number of different ways by which we can bring the system to heel, but then we have to be organized in a way to be able to sustain it independently, right? And so you were going back around when I said organization, that was a short form way of how do we get there? But the whole piece around arguing for food sovereignty and independent production through community production, right, is to put us in the position where we're not dependent upon the market for the goods and services that we need, not at least in this totality. Because if you totally dependent upon that, then they can just control you with food, right? Either you do what I tell you to do, or I will starve you to death. And don't think they are above utilizing that. Learn from what is happening in real time.
Yeah, it's already happened.
That's already happening. The withholding of SNAP and using that as a political weapon, they are not adverse starving us to death if that's what it takes to get us to fall in line, right? So all this is articulated. We have to have some autonomous way to service our own needs that are not dependent upon the markets and the market fluctuations. I want everybody to be clear on that, of why there's this whole push for this autonomy, and starting with the mutual aid, starting with the food production, doing everything we can within our co-ops or whatever kind of, institutions, goods and services we have now, how to expand them with this particular orientation in mind, recognizing that a conflict is coming, right? And they're coming because they're going to bring it to us to get us to comply. And understand what I mean by comply. One of the main aims and objectives of capital in general is getting the U.S. working class to work for lower wages so that U.S. labor can be more competitive on the global international market. Now, what does that mean? That means a declining standard of living for everybody within the United States who works, black, white, brown, or otherwise. And there are very sophisticated methods by which they get people to fall in line. And they are executing them all at once. It's not by accident that they're going to cut people's health care off, right? They just made a decision, I understood, or the Speaker of the House, he just said, I'm not even going to bring up the Affordable Health Care Act for a vote, which means that the subsidies that have kind of been baked in, at least since the pandemic, to support Obamacare, they're just going to let them ride, which means I'm already starting to see it. It's even with Cooperation Jackson's healthcare, we're being impacted by this, right? So what we were paying, it's already tripled. So I think that we're looking at something like $15,000 a month for a collective package, which makes it a little bit lower. So if you're doing this as an individual, by many projections, some people have to pay like $2,500 a month. And we know most people in the United States can't afford that. That's greater than most people's rent, at least in Mississippi, right? In parts of Louisiana, ain't nobody going to afford that. So that means you got millions of people without health care, and everybody's going to get sick at some point in time. That's a guarantee, right? Everybody's going to get sick at some time. The same thing goes with car insurance. So just to add that into it, right? Most folks can't afford car insurance. So you one accident away of losing your means to get to work, and then you don't have no health insurance, which means one minor injury could lead to your death. If something decides to become septic or there's some massive internal injury, so there's a cascade. This is all planned. It's not like they're not aware. It's not like they're unaware of the real consequences of what happens in the world. Hell, even Marjorie Taylor Greene came to that conclusion when she was like, the poor white folks in my district can't afford this. We need to do something about it, right? And she's still running around on CNN talking about, I'm still with the MAGA movement, but there's an economic reality that my community affronts. She was one of them true believers, and there's many like her who thought that he was going to reverse the situation and make things more affordable, at least put more money in their pockets for them to be able to deal with the increase in living, without understanding the who he serves and what he has to serve, which is capital. They have a different game in mind about making sure that they can get the returns that they need and they want at our collective expense. So that's a large part of his program, right? And the piece with the liberals just saying that we're going to get him out the way, they don't have no answers on how to bring jobs back to the United States. And they've been the main ones who've been orchestrating the deconstruction of the United States industrial capacity the last 50 years. So you can't leave the people who created the problem to try to resolve the problem. So we got to get them to folks in the more liberal, those who are willing to accept A, that there's a deep problem, and then B, that the solutions that they've been posing are not going to resolve it, and then C, to put forward an alternative that they can move upon. We got to convince and organize that. But also we need to be prepared that if they don't, and if they won't, and a good number of them, let's be clear, they're not going to side with us. And in point of fact, a good number of them are going to break with the fascists when it comes, when push really comes to shove. So, going back to the subject of this one, dual power and freedom of land, we need to be very clear about what the terms of the struggle would be and get ourselves organized to that level.
So Ashley said, join late, unless said already. Can we get a definition of dual power and how organizers can use mutual aid as a stepping stone to dual power institutions and rooted in people-centered human rights. I think you've been dealing with pieces of that all along. But Ashley let us know, Ashley outed herself and told us that she joined late. Don't ever say you joined late, Ashley. Just get right to the point. So I want to go through these as quickly as we possibly can because Mr. Arthritis is knocking at the door.
Well, we gonna get you some relief. So let's go through a couple of more and then try to answer and close out, and then just make some announcements if there's anything else on that.
I don't see a lot of comments, but not really questions.
Okay.
Ongoing COVID pandemic is absolutely class war botany. Well, mask up, fight back. Oh, my bad. Excuse me. Hold on. It's Ashy, not Ashley. Okay.
Yeah. We got you.
All right. All right. Oh, here's a question. My bad. Induced awe. You've talked this coming conflict a fair bit. What do you see that conflict actually materially looking like? Balkanization, guns?
Yes, to both of those. Trying to think of a short-winded answer rather than a long-winded answer.
Bro, you know you can't do short-winded. Just come on with it. I'm gonna get comfortable.
We try. I mean, let me start this way. I mean, just look at the balkanization that is already occurring. Trump is very comfortable, and his movement is very comfortable assuming minority rule and instituting permanent minority governance. Right? They are not striving to win an outright majority politically and ideologically. They know that cannot happen, just given the demographics and the history of the United States. So, they are repositioning and restructuring society as best they can and as quickly as they can to institute a return to white minority rule in this country. And they're making no bones about it. Everyone else who doesn't agree or who they don't agree with because of the color of their skin, right? Or how they present themselves, sexually, right? And gender-wise, that you can kind of be what you want to be and be who you are, but that will come with penalties. And those penalties will range from just the outright disappearances that are happening with folks, because that is what's happening, right? We still don't know. They had that alligator Alcatraz, and they got forced to be, shut down, quote unquote. We still don't know where most of them people are at. Last I looked or checked. So fundamentally, they were just disappeared. And anybody who knows the history of other kind of fascist regimes, like in Argentina, disappearances was one of the primary means of executing terror and holding the grip of power in society. They are not averse to doing that at all. The United States has a long history, both domestically and internationally, of disappearing people. And they're just going to do it on a much more mass scale. They're not appealing to the masses to kind of support them at all. They're just trying to consolidate their base. And as long as their base is with this program, they will be able to continue to execute it. Just as long as they hold, control over the various repressive apparatus that the United States wields. That's the police, that's the National Guard, that's the FBI and the other kind of intelligence agencies. And at the end of the day, it's the Army, right, or the armed forces of the United States. And as long as they can kind of control them and keep them in line with this agenda, we are going to be in a serious battle. And so we're going to have to figure out ways by which we can intervene politically in the military. And you're starting to see some of that, which is why it's come up in the way it has over the course of the last month. When a few of those liberal Congress people put out their video saying that U.S. soldiers should not execute illegal orders, which they were within their political rights to say, because that's actually something that is enshrined in the actual kind of inductee orders and orientation of military folks, that you're supposed to abide, U.S. military, quote unquote, supposed to abide by the Constitution and the law, not be subservient to just one person, be that a general or the commander in chief or a new king, right? Which is what Donald Trump is clearly trying to set himself up to do. So them stating that, right, on the one hand, you could consider that a moral appeal. But on the other hand, that's a positional piece of trying to weaken, the military and saying, hey, folks shouldn't be just bombing boats, in the Caribbean when there's no evidence that these folks are drug dealers. And even if they were, by U.S. law, that's a criminal piece, which means that they are supposed to go take the ship, arrest the people, and then try them in a court of law.
Due process,
not
summary execution,
right? Which is what they've committed to doing. So I just want to get people to understand they are already doing this in real time.
Yeah.
But because going back to the very first point that Tandy brought up, we kind of have part of American exceptionalism. We kind of have this thing of like, well, it ain't nobody I know has been killed on a boat yet, or nobody, who lives next door to me has been done this way. So as long as it can kind of appear far away and don't have a direct impact, people kind of just turn a blind eye for the most part, or have some moral outrage, at best, but them go along with their daily lives and their routine. We got to get to a point where we break our normal routines and intervene.
It's like a warped version of not in my backyard, because it's not in my backyard.
It's not real.
It ain't real.
Right. Or it doesn't exist. So it's not something I have to worry about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not something I have to worry about. But
best how many people did you hear? Well, I don't know nobody died of COVID. Who are all these people?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. And they're banking on that. So that's something that we're going to have to work on.
Yeah,
and hopefully conversations like this and the tools that we're trying to provide arms people with how to have more pointed conversations with any and everybody you come into contact with, to get them to change their mind, and ultimately the most important thing, to change their practice. Absolutely. And to be in solidarity and organize with people and shift the dynamics. We're not going, we will lose if we don't organize. Point blank, period.
Kia Gregory, you ain't got to keep writing your question in the comments. I see it. This is such necessary data you're providing. I'm thinking of a step one for an individual who is not part of an organization, who has attended all of these mighty build and fight sessions. I can answer that one. Join an organization, find you a neighbor, a good friend, somebody close by you trust, and do some work. But I'm gonna let Kali.
No,
I'm gonna let Kali go.
Yeah, either join an organization or start one. Because it depending on where you're at, oftentimes there's not many options. And so you got to create that option, right? You got to start with those that move them along. The first piece, and why that's the number one in the list of how we constructed to be a scaffolding order. Start with mutual aid. That is your starting place, right? And figure out what are the needs in your community. Oftentimes that is just being clear about what your needs are. We all got some. What your needs are, and who in the community can you engage with to help address some of your needs. But you got to go and talk to people to figure out what's available, what's out there. That's the basis. First part of organizing, is surveying, asking questions, and building relationships. Like that is the starting place. And even if you are an organization, you're still going to have to do that to bring more people into an organized process. So that is the first step, period, is gathering that information and then figuring out how to deploy it in a means that get the results that you want.
Do you have neighbors? If you have neighbors, do you know their names? Do you have their phone numbers? Do you look out for them? Do they look out for you?
Right.
Now, just because of neighbors, I mean, that's when you talk about starting where you are, that's physically where you are. But that doesn't mean that the people who live close to you share your same political beliefs. That might take a moment. A lot of the people who share my political beliefs don't live on my street. But we're beginning to organize. Like, how far away from me do you live? Let's deal with that issue. So on the one hand, I know all my neighbors. I live on the corner. I got all the corner houses and a couple of houses in, got their names, got their phone numbers. And then the people that I am in comradeship with, I've marked, okay, where are you from me? Are you within a mile? Are you a few blocks? That's one way to start it. And as far as some organizations do not take members, cross them off your list. Dang. No, I'm just
that may be where you start a new organization on your own. And that don't mean you can't work with that organization. You just don't necessarily work from its internal discipline and its internal decision making. But if you work with them, you well within your rights to negotiate on what terms y'all do work together with. So you can still practice and exercise democracy even in that case if you're not a part of their internal piece. But anything they do external would have to include the external players within a limit. So you can set up your own thing, and the people that you bring along, y'all determine how you want to make decisions, right? And how you want to execute those. And then when you negotiate with other forces to carry out a broader mission, y'all have to come to an agreement on terms, the basics. What time we're going to start? What are we doing? Who's doing what? Who's responsible for what? What's the follow through process? What resources are we each bringing to the table? What are we responsible for? What is the other group responsible for? If there's a collective kitty that's being, or bank account, excuse me, that's being created, how do we pull that together? How do we govern that? These are basics. And even going back to your point, Tiny, different organ types of organizations are needed to meet different needs. And so, like where I live, there's a couple of neighbors who I know are deeply ideologically opposed.
Right.
Whatever reason. And that's fine. Because we live on the same street, we have a common interest.
Exactly.
Which is that street and making it as livable as possible. So there's still things that I can and do find in negotiating with them over, what would be best for this street. You have a say, I have a say. We may not always even agree on, what my yard should look like or what your yard should look like. But we have to negotiate that within the set of rights, a constellation of things that we can agree upon, and hopefully resolve to ourselves without having to get the authorities involved. And why do I say that? Because that last piece, just to cite an example, one of the projects that we have, we've been trying to make sure that we use all of the land available, front yard, backyards,
right,
all of the land available to do some level of cultivation, right? That is growing food, right, or growing herbs, or growing our own medicine, etc. And many of some of the neighbors are like, well, that's bringing down my property value, or that don't look good, or X, Y, and Z. So it's like, all right, use that as an organizing opportunity. I am doing this, and within this case, you're like, well, we own the property. and within the way this situation is constructed, our individual property rights gives us the authority to do X, Y, and Z. No, I'd rather than cite that to you, let me explain to you what I'm trying to do and
Exactly.
try to bring you into a process,
Mhm.
right? The cost of food, I'm gonna make an argument. The cost of food in our community is going up.
Mhm.
Many people in our community do not have jobs, only have partial employment at best,
Mhm.
right? So if we want to live and not be ragged and not have people starving and other folks breaking into our homes looking for food or looking for goods that they could use to buy a meal for another day or whatever else need that they may have, let's create a situation where we grow enough and we can exchange with each other that we can kind of then shape how the behavior in the community is oriented, so we're not worried about somebody being hungry and that hunger then leading to other things of an antisocial or threatening nature. So there are solutions that we have to pose to deal with the contradictions that clearly exist in our community, right?
Mhm.
And we don't have to wait for the state to do that. Going back to one of the earlier questions that came up, right? Like, at least I can say in Jackson and other places that I frequent quite a lot, there are some very economically quote unquote depressed places where there are a lot of abandoned buildings and lots of abandoned fields. And you can look at that and see a hole. You can look at that and see depression. I look at it, and every place I see an opportunity.
Right.
If that's something abandoned, nobody's using it, I want to put that to use.
Hey, exactly. We need to put it.
Try to fix it up and make it up so we can do something social with it. Put somebody in the place, put some kind of productive activity, but to the best possible, leave no stone unturned. That
Mhm.
is the whole course of. If somebody was trying to say define dual power earlier,
Mhm.
is the dual power as an organizing strategy, is trying to build complementary institutions outside of the domination of capital, and particularly the domination of the state, to build our own power to eventually contest for sovereignty and authority over society. That is one particular strand of dual power as a strategy. Then there's dual power as a moment of contest, where the
Mhm.
two kind of competing forces, right? The kind of the state on the one hand and all the institutions it's supporting, then our autonomous pieces on the other, vying for who is going to control and what are the outcome is going to be, and then what would the future look like. So just to go back and reference that. And this is the piece that the basic organizing components of what we have to do, and the scale. You start at the micro scale, but we have to figure out how to teach people these practices, get people to be involved, get past our fears and social anxieties, which is part of the neoliberal resocialization of society, where we don't even know our neighbors, right? Or we only touched in with abstract people who may or may not exist on Twitter or social or Facebook. It could be some bot that's talking to you instead of a person. And it's better, I would argue, folks, get to know people. Like, off of social media. Social media has its uses, but it's not an organizing tool, it's a mobilizing tool. It can facilitate communication over great distances, but it's not a substitute for building a relationship.
Absolutely not a substitute for building relationships. Yeah. I'm the old woman in the window. I have become that old woman in the window. I let my neighbors know, are you home? Because there's a man on your front porch right now. And they remember that. And they call me, Tandy, are you home? Because there's a bunch of kids on your steps. Oh, like, okay. And I'll be clocking, like, okay, that one's looking out for me. Okay, that one got me. Okay, all right. Now, does that mean that they ready for socialist revolution? Hell no. But we starting
Not yet.
small. We start with, so you start small, but you also be very, very cognizant. Are you living in a tree-lined street? On a tree-lined street? Are you in a tenement? Where you at?
Right.
Where are you at? Not only geographically, but where are you ideologically, and where are you in terms of class? And you organize or prepare accordingly,
That's right.
operate accordingly. So yeah.
Well, Tanya, let's bring this to a close, so we can let you get some rest. I want to thank everybody for all of your questions. Keep them coming. You can, send more on the YouTube thread. The questions are helpful, so please send them in. Even questions I disagree with, send them. There are no bad questions. They may not all get answered, but do send them. They do help. And definitely want to thank everybody over the course of this last 11 months, for tuning in. Hopefully you have found, something that you have listened to in the course of this period of time to be helpful, to be informative, to be practical, that you could use and apply in your community to build out, the things that we need to make the changes that are necessary. I want to encourage folks, one of the best ways to catch up for folks who have not been checking us out, check out the visual notes series that our comrade April Donner. Thank you, April, for all the work that you put in on trying to transcribing notes and putting that out in a visual form for folks to use. Check those out at our website and on all our social media.
Instagram, Facebook.
All of our social media, check us out there. And just to let folks know,
on Jackson Rising and on Black Liberation Media, go to the playlists and look for the Build and Fight formula, and you will see all of the episodes, all of the installments. It's good to go back for a refresher. And if you just joined us most recently and missed the prior ones, go back and catch those prior ones.
And as Tiny mentioned in the beginning, I'm going to take, Tiny's going to still do, shows. I'm going to take a little break for a couple of months, write a book, long overdue on this, and try to get it out. The aim is to get that out in some form or fashion by the summer, and then pick this series back up hopefully in June. And this was the first go run. It was experimental for both me and Tanya, as well as for all of you. But we're going to take all this combined work, like the visual notes, and the next go around, we will have this broken down with clips from the past, things that we want to bring into experience, but then diagrams, right? And kind of action steps that'll be included in the book and the further work. That'll all be there to make this much more accessible, palatable, and utilizable, in your communities and in your work. I still will be doing some commentary through a couple of different series. Most of that, however, will be pre-recorded. So there's an ongoing series of interviews I'm going to be doing with other practitioners in the field with Democracy at Work. That's coming in January. And then a more extensive set of interviews with that'll be much more kind of theoretical, called Shifting Focus, which is based upon the paper that myself and two other comrades, Brian Drolet and Doug Norborg, wrote and issued. I believe that was in 2020. We're going to follow that up with some serious questions on how do we build really a global movement, and how do we get out of the many kind of shortfalls and pitfalls that have been set by the left on an international level for generations now. So that one is going to be a lot of international guests, international in the U.S. context of just trying to figure out how are folks organizing in Africa, how are folks organizing in the Caribbean, in Latin America, in Asia, and bring more of those conversations to a U.S. audience, and to bring their knowledge and experience and insights into the equation, so folks can kind of learn more directly. I think that's very important, which is why I'm going to spend the time in doing it. I know for me, having have oftentimes what I consider a luxury to be able to travel internationally, that always has kept my mind open. And it's the one thing that helps me, I think, fight slipping back into the various forms of American exceptionalism and how they creep up. It's constantly being reminded of what the conditions are, and how folks who are making some serious strides with far less resources than we have in their communities how they're doing that and try to bring that to a broad audience. So be on the lookout for those 2 series coming in January. Shifting Focus will be its own new YouTube channel, and the Build and Fight piece will be on Democracy at Work. And of course, keep looking for us at Jackson Rising. Definitely keep looking for Tondi and her ongoing work and series on Root Work on Black Liberation Media. So stay tuned, and want to thank everybody again.
All right. So again, check out the Build and Fight playlist at Jackson Rising. That is Cooperation Jackson's YouTube channel. Check it out, the playlist here on Black Liberation Media. If you have not already subscribe to Jackson Rising, subscribe to Rootwork, subscribe to Black Liberation Media. Like, share, and subscribe. We already subscribe, but like these episodes and share the links with people.
That's right.
Dare I say, have a study group. Well, I don't want to overload you too much. For now, just share the links with other folks. How about that? We can do that, right?
Subscribe to the channels.
Say again.
And subscribe to the channels.
Subscribe to these channels. We need people to subscribe. Get these numbers up. Help us amplify the messages that we are trying to promote. Anything else, Kali?
Thank you for working with this the last 11 months.
Absolutely, no problem.
You know, we got some work to do. It was a good, I think, a good first run. You know, in terms of meeting, trying to present the theory and the practice, but also meeting the current needs and putting it in a real life context. So we're gonna keep on, but just definitely thank you for your contribution.
Absolutely, no problem. All right, y'all. As usual, appreciate you for hanging with us. Thank you for tuning in. Like, share, subscribe. Like, share, subscribe, and continue to support this channel and support Jackson Rising, the YouTube channel. Go to cooperationjackson.org. Check out the programs that they are involved in. Support the organization there. And I think that's about all I got right now. So I'm going to get on out of here. I'm going to go answer the door that Mr. Arthritis is knocking on. All right. Y'all take care now. Peace.